Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Okay, everyone.
Can you hear me speaking?
Yes.
Great. I'm glad to hear it. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's morning where I am, and you must be Audrey.
Yes, I am, Commander Hadfield. Thank you very much. And thanks so much for taking our call. The students in Lucan Community College are really looking forward and really excited to meet you and have the opportunity to have a conversation with you. We're absolutely thrilled to bits, as we say in Ireland.
Well, I'm glad you're thrilled to bits, and I love Dublin. I think you all know my daughter did her PhD at Trinity, and gosh, I'm going to be in Dublin in a couple of weeks, actually, for another event. I get there pretty regularly. It's a beautiful part of the world, and it's even more beautiful from space. So I'm glad to be able to join with you. Can you just tell me, in 1 minute, just tell me about the school? I know the school's it replaced a previous school. It's been around for a few decades, but just tell me a little bit about the school and the students, and then we'll do questions, if that's okay.
Okay, so this school is over 30 years old now. We're a mixed school, boys and girls. We've got a very strong culture of science, technology, and engineering within the school. Our age range is from 12 to 18. But we've got some visitors from other schools today, and I think we've got your youngest fan who's called up to see us. His name is Osteen. We might try and get him up here for you. He's 5 years old. He's got your book, and he's dressed in his orange astronaut suit. So maybe we can get Osteen up in a few minutes, or maybe near the end to say hi to, because he's super excited to see him travel all the way from Wicklow to see you.
Oh, okay. Well, that's great. All the way from Middle. So I'm ready to start when you are, whatever order you would like. And I know that you sent me some prepared questions, so I'm happy to go through those if you like. However you want to do it. I see people are holding their notes, so they're probably ready to ask questions.
They're all terribly excited. So I'm going to just maybe start with beside me here. I might start with Mohammed. Mohammed, would you like to come up, introduce yourself, and ask your question?
Hello, Commander Hadfield. My name is Mohammed. My question is, what did you bring with you to space?
Hi, Mohammed. Thank you for the question. What did I bring with me to space? Well, I brought this wristwatch, which was specially made for me by Omega. If you read on the back, it's certified for space flight. Certified to fly on board a spaceship. I brought little things for my family. I mean, Mohammed, if you flew in space and you only could bring up a satchel about as big as a shaving kit, what would you bring? I thought it would be nice to bring things for my family, just little things, like my wife's new wedding ring. We got her a new wedding ring, and watches and things for my kids, and things from the schools that I went to. Like you might want to bring something from your school if you went to space, so when you come back, you could give it to the school as a memento of it. So just little things like that. Most of the things you need are provided, your food and your clothes, so you don't need to bring any of that. So it's just nice to bring things that remind you and honor other people. And that's what I brought.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. I think maybe Marco would like to ask you something.
Good morning, Commander Hadfield. What would you do differently if you were to go to space again?
And your name is Marco, is that right?
Yes.
Marco, I flew in space 3 times. So I sort of got to think of that question. I flew twice on the space shuttle. And then on my 3rd flight, I flew the Russian Soyuz spaceship and then lived in space all told for about half a year. So I got to think about, on my 2nd flight and my 3rd flight, what am I going to do differently? Number 1 is get as ready as I possibly could. Study, learn, use every second so that I'm not fumbling around, so that I'm not guessing what I'm supposed to be doing. So I'm as safe as I could be. So if I was flying in space again, I would definitely put a huge amount of work into getting ready because I don't want to be overwhelmed. The second is don't miss it. while it's happening. Don't get so wrapped up in what you're doing that you forget just how wonderful it is where you are. You know, love what's happening. Take a little bit of time, a few minutes out of every hour to notice where you are. And then the last thing is to not keep it to myself. You know, there's hardly anybody has ever flown in space so far. There are many people sitting in that classroom as have ever done a spacewalk. I mean, it's a tiny number of people. So don't just keep it to myself. Do my best to share it using just like using video conferencing or using, you know, Twitter or whatever is available, the technology of the day, in order to share it with as many people so that people can think about their own lives differently. And, you know, imagine if no one had ever left Dublin, ever. If everyone you've ever met had only been in Dublin and Lucan, and then one person traveled all the way to Australia and back and came back and told you about Australia, it would change your whole perception of what you might be able to do. You'd look around at all the other Dubliners and then you'd say, hey, but that person did something different. So maybe I can do something different. And so that was sort of my motivation in sharing the spaceflight experience. So I think those three things: get myself as ready as possible, love every minute of it, and then share it with as many people as I could. And that's what I did on my third flight. And if I could go again, that's what I do again.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commander Hadfield. We're probably going to ask one of our guest schools now from St. Kevin's, Adam. From St. Kevin's, is Adam here? Does Adam have a question? From St. Kevin's? Yeah? Oh, Comfy, sorry. Apologies. So from Comfy, Adam would just like to ask you something.
Morning, Commander Hadfield.
Hello, Adam. How are you today?
Good, thanks. How do you refuel rockets in space?
It's very difficult to refuel a rocket in space. Sometimes you have to, though. In fact, what Elon Musk and SpaceX are thinking, because they want to take rockets and land on the moon, it takes so much fuel to get your rocket up and away from the Earth that you often don't have enough fuel left to do all the other things you want to do. So it'd be nice to launch one rocket full of fuel and then another rocket full of people and then dock them together and then transfer the fuel. And then you could go to the moon or Mars. But without gravity, what makes the fuel move? And if you even think about a pump inside a tank without gravity, what pushes the fuel down into the pump? It's really hard to think about. So what we do is let's say this is a gas tank, okay? It's my NASA tea mug. But let's say this is a tank full of fuel. What you do is you have like a flexible rubber membrane on the top, and then you put a high pressure gas on this side, and you push gas into this tank, and it squeezes on that membrane to push down into this tank, to push all the fuel out of this tank into the other one. So we actually use like helium normally, because it doesn't weigh that much, as a gas with a big flexible membrane to push the fuel from one tank to another. And then it's just a matter of whether you can get your plumbing connected properly so that nothing leaks. And if you look closely at SpaceX's plans, they're planning to take two rocket ships, dock them together, and then make sure all the plumbing is connected, and then use those gas pressure-driven diaphragms to squeeze the fuel into the other tank. And when it's full, they can undock, go to the moon.
Thank you, Commander Hadfield.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. This must kind of make you feel the Canadian version of University Challenge, where people just keep firing questions all the time. But okay, we've got a kind of an out there one from David Wright. Where's David?
Good afternoon, David. How are you?
I'm good. So, hi, Chris. My question for you is, what is the most interesting or crazy thing you have ever seen in space?
Well, there's two different things, maybe, David. When you turn your gaze out to the universe, especially, David, imagine if you were outside on a spacewalk right now, so that you're not surrounded by the room or the windows, but every place you look, there's an infinite view. That's a really bizarre and spectacular thing, to look with nothing in the way into the unfettered eternity of the universe. And not just in one direction, all around you, to be out alone in the universe. And it's kind of hard to think at that moment, am I tiny? Because in proportion I'm tiny. Or am I huge? Because I'm actually here. And I'm seeing this for the very first time on behalf of everybody else. And I felt both of those things. I felt infinitesimally small, but I felt huge with privilege to be there to see it. And that really made me think. But the other even more bizarre thing is then to turn your gaze and look back at the Earth. It's just a planet. It's like looking at the moon, or like looking at Mars through a telescope. It doesn't look like home. It doesn't look like where you are. It's just a planet. But it's beautiful, and the textures constantly change. And you go around it in 90 minutes. You know, think of what you did in the last 90 minutes, the last hour and a half. Imagine if you'd gone around the world once, all the things that you could see. And so the immense variety and age and color and texture of the world is super bizarre as well. From the big natural things to the man-made things like all the ports. You can see the port at Dublin really clearly because of the shapes of it. And you can see the pyramids if you look carefully. You can see at dawn and dusk, you can see the shadow of the pyramids. It's like reaching out and touching 5,000 years of history, because right there below you are the pyramids that those people made so long ago. Everything on Earth I found bizarre and fascinating. And to be in between the two of them, the Earth and the rest of opportunity, to me, that was maybe the most bizarre and fascinating thing of all.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Just get your breath back, your tea and coffee. So we've got another young man here. Romeo has a really interesting question. So Romeo.
Hello there, Mr. Hayfield.
Hi, Romeo. How are you today?
I'm very good, thank you. I've got a question for you. What is the mental health of being in space?
What's the mental health of being in space?
Yes. How do you stay sane?
Yeah, we think about it a lot, Romeo, because you're a long way from home. And so we have a whole team of psychologists and psychiatrists that have tried to make sure that we stay sane. Some of the early astronauts and cosmonauts had a very difficult time because they weren't well supported. They felt sort of abandoned. They felt disrespected. And also they felt that what they were doing wasn't valued and wasn't important. And if you get all those things together, it can really start to weigh heavily on your thoughts. So we've learned a lot from that. And as a result, we have direct contact with our family every day. You can teleconference like this or video conference once a week. I could email with them. I could talk to them on the phone. We're super busy up there. There's a million things to do. The space station is such a huge, complicated laboratory. You're running 200 experiments, and it's a big place that has to be fixed. So you can talk to your family, and you're super busy, and then they put fun stuff on board for you, just like you need in normal life, like a book to read. There's musical instruments up there. There's a guitar on the space station, and it's not there stupidly. It's there because music and art are really important for mental health. That's why we have them on Earth. They make us human. And imagine if you had to go through your whole life with no music. It would be unnatural. And so we try and provide all of the things that keep us healthy and happy and sane on Earth we're trying to provide those on board a spaceship. And Romeo, you may have a chance to live on the moon. And you'll need all those things when you're living on the moon as well. You'll need to bring enough of the things that keep us healthy on Earth to any new place that we go to. We're learning as we go. But the crew that's up there right now, I was talking to one of them this morning. He's from Italy. His name is Luca Parmatano. And Luca is just loving it. He's the commander of the spaceship. Super busy, super engaged, loving communicating with Earth. The great spacewalk they did yesterday. If you have enough exciting things to do and you're in touch with your friends and family, then you not only stay sane, but you thrive and you do well. So we that's how we take care of ourselves out there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hayfield.
Thank you. You're very welcome. Thanks.
Thank you, Romeo. So I've got one of the girls here for you. Ava. Is Ava here? Yeah. Ava's quite interested in a couple of things about space.
Hello, Ava.
Hi, good morning, Commander Hadfield. My question is, who or what did you miss the most when you were in space?
Huh. Well, of course, I would have liked to have my wife there and my family. My dog. Would have been lovely to have my dog there. You know, he's sleeping right down here. Here, let me show you. He has a big bed. So that's Albert. And it would have been lovely. You know, I took him for a nice walk this morning. But I think, Ava, if you're busy at what you're doing and you love what you're doing, then you don't spend a lot of time missing things that you're not doing. And you don't really miss things. You know, I try and really enjoy what's happening and focus on what's around me and not spend my time wishing I was somewhere else. You know, so it would have been nice to have my family there, but I think it was better to be able to go do that and live in space and then bring that richness of experience back to my family rather than never to have gone. So I didn't spend my time in space wishing I was back on Earth. You know, it's more the opposite. I loved what was happening. I couldn't wait to come back and tell everybody about the wonders of what I saw and did up there. That's more how I felt.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commander Hadfield. So we were recently reading in the news about the issue of space junk, you know, the junk that's maybe floating around the planet. And Holly has an interesting question for you about the space junk.
My name is Holly Martin. I'm a first year, and when like there's like all sorts of space stuff, like asteroids and stuff, flying at the spaceship at like thousands of kilometers per second. Are you ever worried that like something might penetrate the spaceship and like send you all to your deaths?
Of course. So the first thing is to understand it. What is the real risk? The Earth gets hit by about 40 tons of meteorites every day. 40 tons. You know, that's a lot. Now, that's just natural. That's just the gravity of the Earth pulling the little rocks and asteroids from the universe, and they come into our atmosphere. Most of them are tiny, like a bit of dust. But some of them, you know, as big as your fist. And then occasionally there's one as big as a car. And once every many thousands and thousands of years, there's a huge one that can do a lot of damage. So the real question is, if you know that there's 40 tons of natural debris and a little bit of man-made debris hitting the world every day, then what do you do about it? So it's sort of like you know that people fall off their bicycles and get injured, and people have car accidents every single day. But you still ride a bicycle, and you still ride in a car. So you have somehow come to terms with the fact that there's a risk, but it's worth taking. And space flight is the same thing. there is a risk of getting hit by debris, but is it a risk worth taking or not? And if you do the math, you know, eventually, of course, something bad will happen, but the odds are low enough that it's not going to kill you right away. And then what we do is we put armor on the outside of the spaceship. If this is the hull of the spaceship right here, then just standing off just a centimeter or so is another layer, like a thin plated layer like this. So when the debris comes in, it hits the outer plate layer, and then it sort of spatters. By the time it hits the hull of the ship, it doesn't have enough energy to punch a hole anymore. But if it did punch a hole, then we practice for depressurization. And we've got, like on a submarine, and we've got hatches you can close, just in case we did have a leak. And we have oxygen masks. And if all else failed, we could race and get into our little spaceship that brought us up there and close the hatch and fly the spaceship home. So we have emergency procedures. So yes, it's a concern, but there's a lot of other concerns up there too. It's not the only risk. There are thousands and thousands of risks. And what you need to do in life, I think, is decide what is worth taking a risk for. Like, what is it that you want to do? And it's going to have risk. So if I'm going to take this risk, then how can I understand it and change who I am so that when this bad thing happens, I'm not just sitting here shivering with my fingers crossed, but actually know what to do. And I can take care of myself. And just like riding a bike or driving a car, then you don't have to worry all the time. And that's how we deal with it on the spaceship.
Thanks. Have a nice day.
You also. Thank you.
I know we're running close to time, Commander Hadfield. I know you're a busy man. A lot of us watched your documentary that you did on the BBC channel about what it takes to become an astronaut. It was amazing. But I think Stan has a question about what happens when you come back to Earth after being an astronaut. So I'll let him say it.
I think I heard your name is Stan. Hello, Stan. Hope your day's going okay. And hey, Stan, the pattern that is on everybody's on the ladies' skirts there, is it some particular pattern? Does it represent the school? Do you know?
I don't really know. No.
Oh, okay. All right. Anyway, go ahead with your question, Stan.
So when you come back to Earth from being, I believe it's 6 months in space, what are the effects to your body when you land on Earth?
There are lots of them. So, Stan, as you stand there right now, gravity is pushing you down into the floor, and your muscles and your bones are holding you up. If you take away gravity, then you don't need all those muscles and bones because you don't have to fight gravity. So you start to lose your skeleton because your body doesn't build it anymore, and your muscles waste away. So when you come home, if you didn't exercise a lot, your muscles would be weak and your skeleton would be very fragile. Also, hey, Stan, just do something for me here, please. Turn around and face everybody in the room. Turn and face everybody. Now close your eyes.
Yes.
And Stan, even with his eyes closed, Stan doesn't fall over. It's because he's got a balance system inside his head, and it tells him where gravity is so that he can balance even without vision. Well, without gravity, you can't tell which way is up and down anymore. And so your balance system kind of goes away. And the only way you can tell which way you're pointed is with your vision. So when you come home, you're super dizzy because you have to sort of relearn what's going on with your balance system, with your inner ear, and try and readapt that with your vision system. And then all of that put together makes you feel sick. So a couple of days you feel kind of sick, but you get over it. And it takes about a week to sort of feel okay, about a month to truly feel good, but it takes about 1.5 years to grow your skeleton back to its original density. So it takes a long time to recover. But I do it again just like that. It's such a great experience. I don't mind doing a little rehab. It's nice to be able to have that human experience. And I'm recovered and fine again now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commander Hadfield. Just a quick reply to your question. So the skirts, that the girls are wearing. It's a type of kilt, and it kind of just, it's the colours of our school, our colour palette. And we also have a crest here. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, yeah, I can.
Yeah, so underneath we've got our name, Lucan Community College, and Aintos is the word which means unity, which will be our school motto and our school ethos. As you can see, we've got quite a diverse student population here. And I know, yes. So I
It's
know
okay. We can do a few. I have time for a few more questions.
You've got time for a few more. I think I've discovered your number one fan in the audience. I've got a little guy here, Oisin. He had your book, The Dark is Dark, in his hand, but I don't know, we might have to get him to stand up.
Oh, it's okay. I can see him.
You're his absolute hero, Commander Hadfield. So,
what's your name?
Okay.
His name is Oisin.
Oh, Ocean, it's very nice to meet you. And Ocean, do you like the book, The Darkest Dark?
Yeah.
And you remember the name of the dog in The Darkest Dark?
Dog.
The dog that's in The Darkest Dark. Yeah, that's him right there.
No.
That's Albert. Albert is the dog in The Darkest Dark. That's Albert. Anyway, Ocean, did you have a question for me?
Yeah.
What's your question?
How do you drive the ISS?
How do you do what on the ISS?
How do you drive the ISS?
Oh, how do you drive the ISS?
Yeah.
It has controls in it, sort of like driving an airplane or flying an airplane. And you can make it turn to go up, or turn to go down, or turn to go left, or turn to go right. You have motors on the back that you can, and they're rockets. So you can fire your rockets. So you can not only turn the ISS, but you fire your rockets. And then the last thing we have, Ocean, is we have great big heavy spinning wheels inside. And they keep us from drifting around, sort of like the bicycle wheel. And we call them gyrodynes or moment gyros. And these great big gyrodynes are spinning, and they help keep us nice and stable as we go around the world. And then the last thing we need is to decide where to go. And so we have computers on board. They're looking at where the Earth is and where the stars are and figuring out exactly where we are and where we're pointed. And by using all that information, then we can figure out how to fire our engines and spin our gyrodynes and decide where to go next.
What? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks very much, Commander Hadfield.
Yeah. Just a second. Do you have my face on the screen?
Yeah. Do you have mine?
You should put Ocean by the screen and get a picture of Ocean and me in the same picture before I.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
He'd like to get
Ocean
that
has
picture.
totally looked out today, big time.
Ocean, come on up and we'll do a picture together.
Bring your book,
You can get
Oisin.
your next. Maybe get your next question ready if you like.
Okay, we can get the next question. Sorry. Oh, yes. So, I've totally lost my sheet now. No, he goes there. Can we see? Oh, Maya. Are you going to ask the next one? Okay. Where's my sheet gone? Oh, this is my sheet. Oh, you were asking me the question. Yeah. Wow. Thanks, Mr. Commander Hadfield. A memory made for life there, I think. Thank you so much for that. Maybe, do you have time for one more?
Yes, one more, and then
one more. Okay.
Wake up the dog.
And then you got to go, busy man. Okay. Rory, do you want to come up here and just ask?
Hi, Rory.
Hi, Chris. How are you? I was wondering. My question is, what's the best way to describe the feeling of zero gravity?
Let's see. There's a couple different feelings. Have you ever ridden in the back of like a bus or a big vehicle that's on a bumpy road. And when they go over a bump, for a second, you kind of float in your seat and then sag down again. Have you ever felt that, Rory?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
So that's like the initial taste of it. And then maybe if you've been on a diving board, where you walk to the end of a diving board and you launch yourself into space, and just for maybe a second, you're weightless. And then of course, you splash into the water. Well, if you, I don't know, are you a skydiver?
No, I'm not, no.
Yeah. Well, a skydiver is sort of not just in the back of a bus bouncing or jumping off a diving board, but as a skydiver, of course, you can step out of an airplane and you'll fall weightless for a while. But then, because you're pushing through the air, it's sort of like an umbrella or a parachute. The air sort of holds you up and it blows into your face. So you're not really weightless. You're being held up somewhat by the air. So you get all of that rush of wind. But when you first step out of the airplane, that's weightlessness. But imagine if you could step off that airplane and just all of a sudden fall perfectly forever. That's what weightlessness is like. And maybe there's one little experiment you can do, Rory, to get a sense of it. Next time you're in a swimming pool, go out away from the walls, get lots of air in your lungs, and then let just enough air out of your lungs so that you're not floating to the top, but you're not sinking to the bottom. So you're just sort of suspended in the water as long as your heart and lungs will let you do that. And then suddenly you're weightless. And imagine, your arms will sort of float up naturally in front of you. Your legs will bend a little. You'll bend at the waist. Your head will forward. It's sort of like an infant inside their mother's womb, the natural relaxed state of the human body. And imagine if you could be like that for half a year, where you're perfectly free in all different dimensions. It's kind of magic. It's a little bit like you're an X-Man, like you have a superpower. Like now you can push off of one wall and just fly effortlessly to the other one. It's a wonderful feeling. It's like you have a superpower. So I really recommend it. If you get a chance, try and get yourself on board a spaceship, because weightlessness is the greatest gift of all.
Yeah, thanks very much.
You're very welcome.
Thanks a million, Commander Hadfield. Maybe we do have some budding astronauts. I think your zero gravity analogy has got everyone, they're either going to start skydiving, swimming, or trying to become an astronaut. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I know you're a very busy man, and we in Lucan Community College really appreciate that you've taken the time out of your schedule. And maybe some of us might look you up when you come to Dublin. We'll start to follow you on Twitter and find out where you're going.
Great. Yeah, please do. And I want everyone there to remember, when I was a student in elementary school, like the young person in the orange suit, or in high school like you are, it wasn't hard to be a Canadian astronaut. It was impossible. Canada did not have astronauts. We didn't have a space agency. We didn't have rocket ships. It wasn't like, it's going to be hard for me to be an astronaut. It was, by definition, impossible. But I thought things change, and impossible things occasionally do happen. So the only thing I can really control is myself. And I thought, the only thing I can really do here is change who I am. Try and turn myself into someone more capable. I need to keep my body strong. That's up to me. I need to learn complicated things. Learn how to scuba dive. Learn how to fly. Become an engineer. Whatever you're interested in. And always stay engaged and active and optimistic and improving who I am. And I never counted on flying in space. I never thought it was going to happen. All I really knew was I'm going to keep trying and see what happens in my life. And incredibly enough, I got to scuba dive and fly and skydive and all those other things. And I got to fly in space 3 times, do 2 spacewalks, and command a spaceship. So the real question lies with you. what are you going to do with your body and your brain in the time that you have available? And it's amazing what can happen. Don't wait for somebody else to do it for you. Take control of your own life. It can be incredibly rich. Thank you very much for inviting me into your school today. Bye now.